November 3rd, 2001. You may be the most interesting person I have ever met, if you can call this meeting. I would really like to meet you and learn more about you. Would you like to come take a quiet walk through wildlife on Easy Street afternoon tomorrow? For those of us keeping track, that would be Sunday on most calendars. We are closed on Sundays, and by about 1 p.m. most of the cleaning staff is gone, so we would have the place to ourselves. If you are too stressed out with moving, I understand. I would offer to come help you unpack, but that seems like a huge invasion of your already exposed soul. Moving always makes me turn inward with wondering why I thought I needed any of this stuff. You made no mention of why you are resettling, but when you are ready, I would like to know. I wept at your loss and momentarily was empathetic to your grief as if it were my own. I have only had the one daughter, and for a moment felt the crushing blow that came down on my chest at the thought of her taking her own life. I can't even imagine the horror of living with that kind of devastation day after day. It goes against everything we are prepared for. We know that we will lose loved ones because no one gets out alive, but we are never conditioned to lose a child. You certainly do have the strength of many men to not have just survived, but to have taken this opportunity to look for meaning in your life. To have concluded that all things work together for good is a remarkable indication of your ability to see the big picture. What you call the spirit speaking, I have always thought of as God. Most people would think me strange to say that God talks to me, but I think he talks to all of us, and most either ignore him, or, if we take heed, we are not about to confess that God spoke to us for fear of ridicule. It is that still small voice that whispers encouragement to take that leap of faith, or that warns us that we are headed for certain disaster. Almost every stupid thing I ever did came right after I ignored that little voice. Every moment of greatness or deliverance that I ever experienced was encouraged by that voice. I try harder to listen for it now. It competes with the voice of reason, my small human version, to be heard, so sometimes I am not sure which is which, and I may argue it out for days before making a decision. I am thankful that God is so patient. I am fascinated by the choices you have made in your profession and your passion. My father was a pilot, trained in the Air Force, and then a flight instructor, and then the personal pilot for Governor Arch Moore in West Virginia. When Governor Rockefeller took over office, he sold all the planes and bought helicopters. So my parents moved back to Tampa in the late 70s, and my father started his own business. I became the youngest state employee at the age of 15 and worked as the secretary to the secretary for Governor Rockefeller. My job was to assemble bios and photos of all of the diplomats that the governor would memorize before going into meetings with them. This was before the computer age, so research became a full-time job for me, and I loved it. My father had been a private investigator as a supplement to his income as a flight instructor, so I had the genes for it. If you read about my husband's disappearance, you will know he loved to fly, but he lost his license 3 days after getting it. At that time, that's what I thought was true. Turns out he actually never got his license. He used to fall asleep as soon as we reached cruising altitude, so I started taking lessons on the sly in case I had to land. I loved flying, but was scared to death of landing. I never made a bad landing, but they all seemed to have that potential. At the time of Don's disappearance, I had just passed my written and was scheduled to fly my flight check, but never rescheduled. I sold the planes. Every time a small one flies over, and I'm in the flight path to Tampa International Airport, I look up and remember, I only had a few hundred hours, but over 8,000 hours, that has to be a big part of you. My first plane was made of cardboard, and I asked my dad to be sure and draw all of the instruments just like they were in his plane. I was 7, and I was sure the thing would fly because he knew what to draw. A chiropractor, too. Amazing. I owe my life to Dr. Kellogg, a chiropractor who raised me from a wheelchair to a fully functional being after breaking my neck in 2 places in a car crash. The medical doctors told me I would never walk again, and that I would have to have a steel rod inserted in my spine. I was paralyzed for 6 months, and when my grandfather found me, he took me straight to Dr. Kellogg, who had me walking in no time. The medical doctors said it would never last, and that by the time I was 30, I would be back in the chair. I opted to walk as long as I could, and that was 24 years ago. I recently suffered a slipped disc doing sit ups, and his daughter, Lori Capria, had me back at full tilt within a few months. Dr. Kellogg died several years ago. Even your interest in disease and its prevention is of the utmost interest to me. I almost never get sick, maybe 5 or 6 times in my life, and usually something really exotic. My father has been sick twice in his life. My mother gets sick every few years, but not for very long, and not very sick. My great-great-grandmother died at 103 while dancing in the kitchen, and we have always had at least 5 generations on the ground and often 6. I credit this to how we deal with stress and how we treat our bodies. We have all been very religious, thus no drugs, alcohol, or anything else harmful, except for my father and me in our early years when we drank a lot. I haven't had a stiff drink in over 20 years, and he hasn't had one in 40. He still smokes, but I quit 10 years ago. We have always had a healthful approach to life, avoiding inoculations, antibiotics, and medical doctors as much as possible. We have always put some thought into what we eat, choosing things that are identifiable over processed who knows what. We all take vitamins, but I am trying to find a more direct method of getting the proper nutrition than supplements. Cancer became a cause for me last summer when I lost a clouded leopard to it, and then this year I lost a Canada lynx to cancer. I've lost other cats to it as well, but these were the breaking point for me, and that still small voice said, "You can stop this." Since that time, I have invested in a water filtration system for the cats and my own water and my family's. It's really incredible and inexpensive if you don't have one yet. I have been investigating and just recently implemented a way to raise all of my own cat food. I spent all day with a man learning how to feed whole grains to the rats and chicks, so that no processed food goes into them that will end up in the cats. That turned out to be one of the dumbest things I ever did, but I tried to raise organic chickens if you didn't quite gather that. I have been experimenting with holistic remedies as opposed to antibiotics and have had some success. The most difficult part of holistic remedy is that it usually requires absorption via the tongue. And so now that we are doing operant conditioning with the cats to make some of these procedures more possible. The cats are loving the training because it's all by reward and gives them something to do. I have a lot to learn in all of the above. And a health doctor to boot. Wow. Real estate investment is how I fund my passion. And I am always in the process of buying, fixing, and selling homes. I've only ever had a couple of them built. I have a couple more to get built on vacant lots that I'm holding. I enjoy painting, wallpapering, and do most of what needs to be done on my own home, but it's not cost effective for me to do the work for the inventory. I am even hiring a man to hang my wallpaper on Wednesday, and surprised that I'm not doing it myself. It is way past my bedtime, but I was so inspired by your letter. I had to respond before heading off to sleep. Sweet dreams for the cats, Carole. And that was a letter to Peter Kent. I'm not sure how his letter came to me, but I'm guessing that it was probably through some dating site or something, because he was on all of the dating sites, as I later learned. So his name was Peter Kent, and this was from Peter. Carole, I have something to say I wish for you to hear. I say it with a beingness of mine, somewhat of a loneliness and a searching. I love your words, and I have an attitude about notes. People put the amount of work in them that they are willing to give to a mate, a counterpart. I thank you for your contribution, for making me feel hope that there is a considerate, intelligent being out there for me that makes sense and has the capacity to love. Thank you for the passion, for your love of purpose and cause that your life. Thank you for the passion, for your love of purpose and cause that you live your life with. That's why that doesn't make sense, because it's a typo. I pray the prayer of Jabez several times daily. It's a small, rather popular name to a book at the present time. I usually do not like books by preachers, but I like the simplicity of the prayer of Jabez. It is a hidden message from, I think, Exodus. Paraphrased, it says, Heavenly Father, creator of all love, power of the universe, I ask you to bless me this day, expand my territories. May your hand be with me in all that I do. Keep me from evil and let me cause no pain. I ask that you, Carole, See the wonder in that prayer. What else could one ask for? In no area does it guide God or assist him in a direction that you feel your own infinite wisdom, tongue in cheek, knows. And I apologize for how some of his letters are not going to make sense because I'm reading them exactly like he wrote them. I love that prayer. It allows for blessings without a request that you input would screw up. Your own input would screw up. 3 things, please. 1, I know nothing about your husband's disappearance because the English language does not differentiate between present tense read and past tense read. I do not know what you were saying when you said, if you read about my husband's disappearance. I have no knowledge of that. 2, I am resettling because I have come to the end of my sojourn of introspection. It has been a journey, and now I'm on my way to do something worthwhile. My intention was to be without things for a while, to play, to look, to watch, to learn. Initially, I went to Colorado with my car and motorcycle to tour the mountains, to feel the majesty and simplicity of every small town in Colorado. It was joyful, living in a tent in various places, but it only lasted for 7 weeks. I almost feel guilty saying this, but you should probably suffer similarly. I have such a strong work ethic that I could not do that task without feeling I was accomplishing something. I also have this thing about learning something. After 7 weeks of playing, I enrolled in a master's program of Oriental Medicine in Albuquerque, where I spent the past 3.5 years. I am now freshly out of school, taking my National Board acupuncture exam in Jacksonville next Saturday. My trusty car, which got me through those years out west, caught fire the 1st of August, and I am reduced to an old work truck and my motorcycle. I am broke beyond being broke, but filled with love and dedication to do something worthwhile. I am working today to finish a small tile job in Clearwater, to buy a bed, to prepare for my son's visit in 2 weeks. I have learned so much in the past 10 years. Resettling is a gentle word. There is more to it than that. What I was and what I am is not the same. 3, my daughter did not die. What she was died, and a large piece of me died. But she lives with 2 children in Ohio. There was lots of expense to save her life, to have her institutionalized, to heal her body and mind. She is not the same, but she is good and strong in her own new self. She is adopted. Her mom is the mother of my son, who is 11 years younger than she. There is some mental illness on my wife's side. I cannot and don't wish to decide if my ex is of dual personality or the strongest woman on earth. She took my son from me after this ordeal with my daughter, and he and I are just now getting back together in life. He is the strongest and most successful, best judgment young man I have ever known. Much of his character was formed through these happenings. He is a cadet at VMI in pre-med and doing very well at age 21. A chunk of me was lost when all of this happened. If it was the same ordeal as though she had died, she is not the same person. All that being said, all is better now, including me. There were some miracles that happened through this. I will tell you sometime, but not now. I did not tell you of her life on purpose. It just came out that way in the narrative I wrote. I have to go to work this morning. I have to finish this tile job in Clearwater. I would like to visit with you this afternoon, and if you will write me a note as to the specifics when I get back. I have to leave now. Peter Kent.